Hello and welcome to day 4 of the Inspiring Workplaces Summer Series. Where's the week going? I don't know about you, but we really hope that these bite-sized chunks of information and inspiration are being well received out there. They're really energizing us, so we hope they're doing the same for you. Yesterday's speaker, Deborah Corrie, suggested that maybe I start talking about some of the items that are on my shelf behind me. I don't know how many I can get through, but to that end, this is a little American football from the University of Texas, the Longhorns, that I visited in Austin last year, and I hope to get back there soon. Matthew McConaughey, a big Longhorns fan. Just back to next week, we've got our gig confirmed. We're using the same band, Intimo, from our launch gig, and then we're using various different artists from around the world thereafter. So, to today's guest, we couldn't start the summer series without this man. We've known him for a long time. He's spoken at past awards and alliance events. I consider him a friend now. We were talking actually earlier that just how much the world's changed. A few months ago, we were in the pub in London, catching up, talking about how we were going to get married, not to each other, but to our better halves. And he was going to get married in April. I was in July, but obviously that's all changed up, and we've kept in contact and kept each other going ever since. He's the CEO of Breaking the Silence, and he's going to talk to us about, driving energy for our people, our employees during challenging times, which I think is a very, very pertinent and relevant topic right now. So please welcome David Beeney. Hello.
Thank you very much, Matt, and good afternoon, everybody, or wherever you are in the world, maybe good morning. So what brings me here today? I had a very normal career working in media for over 36 years, a very normal career, reasonably successful, but not too successful. But throughout that entire time, I was hiding a dark secret. And what was that secret? That secret was that I was battling in private with my mental health. Even I didn't realize until I looked back that nobody in my world knew what was going on with my mental well-being. I'm sad to say, not my ex-wife of 28 years, not my mates down the local pub, and nobody I worked with had any idea that I was battling with panic attacks and anxiety on an almost daily basis. Well, on the 16th of May 2016, just over 4 years ago, I outed myself about my mental health for the very first time. And it's changed my life, and it's changed my life for the better. It's the best thing that I've ever done. So do I still suffer panic attacks today? Yes, I do. I even 10 minutes ago when I was chatting to Matt, I was thinking to myself, how embarrassing if I had a panic attack in front of all of you this afternoon. And so naturally, people have said to me, how do I get through these talks without having one? It's a really good question. The first time I was asked it, I said the honest answer is, I don't know. But there's a phrase we associate with poor mental health, that it's okay not to be okay. And perhaps I've truly embraced that. But I knew it wasn't the answer. As time went along, I started to understand more and more what was going on with me and the audiences and how I was getting through these sessions without becoming too breathless. And what helped me one day, I got involved with a graduate assessment day where all the graduates had to do a talk about something they were really passionate about. And they were all brilliant. One of them talked about skiing, one talked about music, one talked about horses. But then Abigail stood up and Abigail said, my name's Abigail and I've got bipolar. And for the first time that day, the room fell silent. For the first time that day, people put their mobile phones down. Because what Abigail was doing was inspiring people by sharing her vulnerability. It's no longer weak to admit that you struggle with your mental health. You actually inspire people around you. And I think the phrase is, you'll keep the dressing room with you. It's evidence-based now that a CEO is more likely to lose his job in the boardroom if he doesn't show weakness. When you show the human side of you, you inspire people around you. So I started saying to people, the reason I avoid panic attacks is because I'm inspiring people by sharing vulnerability. I still knew it wasn't the answer. I've dreamed of finding a cure, and cure is a really good word to use because I will never, ever, ever be cured. As I said before this talk, I thought, how embarrassing if I become breathless in front of all of you this afternoon. But I've realized what happens these days. I now give myself permission. I say to myself, if I'm going to have a panic attack, then have one. Show you on camera what it looks like. Try and talk you through what it feels like while I'm actually having one. And by allowing myself to have one, I'm being kind to myself. I'm showing myself compassion. So I think the reasons I largely these days have won my battles with anxiety is that I've discovered the importance of being kinder to myself and the value of compassion. When I first ever told my mental health story, it resonated with more people and at a deeper level than anything I've ever done in my life before. However, and it's a really, really big however, people started coming up to me and saying to me, David, today I've realized I'm normal. Thank you so much for sharing your mental health story. But I'm going to be honest with you. I could never share with my employer my true mental health because I think it would have a negative impact on my career. And more people came up to me saying to me that they couldn't trust their employer if they were honest about their mental health. So I chose back in the beginning of 2017 that where I needed to focus my energy was on helping organizations to create kinder cultures of trust in the workplace. And I've been so privileged in the last few years to work with many of the leading brands around the UK and parts of Europe in helping them to become kinder and helping them to create environments whereby people can be really honest and open up about their well-being. And that's particularly important at times like now when we're going through this awful pandemic. With regard to this pandemic, I've been asked almost daily, how many of us are likely to suffer with some degree of poor mental health with what's going on at the moment? And without doubt, it's absolutely every single one of us. The first time I ever put a deck together about mental health, I asked for feedback and I sent it out to various people and they all came back to me and said, David, you've got no statistics in your slides. And I remember saying, take this in the right spirit, but every statistic I've ever read about mental health is complete bullshit. I said, no one knew about me for 36 years. How many more people are out there like me that nobody knows about? And in many ways, I've been proved right. Thousands of people have now spoken to me in recent years that they suffer in silence with their mental health. A very sad statistic for you, but 4 out of 10 suicides come as a complete shock to family and friends. So in other words, 40% of people who take their own life manage to mask it completely from people that love them most. A very another statistic, which I don't know where they get this one from, but for every 20 employees who dial into work with mental health, only 1 or 2 people tell the truth. The rest of the people would rather say they've got diarrhea or a migraine or problems with kids or problems with the car. So I've never changed my view that I am very cynical about statistics around mental health. The most common statistic we see in the UK is that 1 in 4 of us every single year is going to suffer with some degree of poor mental health. I don't get that. I don't think it's 1 in 4 at all. I think it's 1 in 1. And I think when we start to think about 1 in 1, we destigmatize this subject. We make it easier for absolutely everybody to open up about mental well-being. I want you all to ask yourself this question today. Have you experienced any of these, what I'm about to talk about, in the last few months? Have there been days when you've struggled to concentrate because you've got a lot going on in your mind? You may be worried about your partner who's been furloughed. You may be worried about your parents who are being shielded. You may be worried about, do you send your kids back to school? You might be worried about finances. You might be worried about your health. You might be worried about the viability of your business and you're struggling to stay focused. Have there been nights when you've had disturbed sleep and you've woken up 2 or 3 times and you just, you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you can't get back to sleep again? Have there been days when your energy's been low and you're feeling like quite lethargic and you can't quite get yourself going? We all know a certain level of stress is good for you, but too much isn't. Well, everything I've just mentioned there is not great mental health. We've got this perception around the globe that you've only got poor mental health if you're diagnosed with depression or you're diagnosed with an anxiety disorder or you're diagnosed with schizophrenia. Well, you don't have to be diagnosed with poor mental health to have poor mental health. We've all got health, both physical and mental. And on some days, your physical health can be better. And on some days, your mental health can be better. I think quite passionately that if I had my way, I'd get rid of the word mental tomorrow, because I think we've changed the meaning of it to be a word that none of us really want to associate with. We all know Google Images really well. If you type into Google Images mental health, do you know what images come up? Images of someone like me with their head in their hands looking really sad. Most of the images would be negative images, people looking in distress. Dare I say it, people looking suicidal. In contrast, if you put into Google Images physical health, do you know what comes up? Images of Usain Bolt, images of Arnold Schwarzenegger, the footballer Cristiano Ronaldo. Every image is of an amazingly fit athletic body. Why? You know, why is physical health seen as positive and mental health seen as negative? Some of you watching here today, you may have not great physical health at the moment, but you may have a really sharp mind. As you can hear, I get really frustrated about the way people view mental health. All mental health is the health of your mind, and we all want healthier minds. We've got to start getting parity between mental and physical health to make this subject easier to talk about. What does a training program look like to become mentally fitter? Because mental health starts with ourselves. What can we do to build our own personal resilience during really tough times like this? I've been lucky in recent years to be running workshops almost every week, and the most popular breakout group is what do we need to do to become mentally fitter? So I'm now going to share that insight with you. And I'll say to you now, I'm not going to talk about anything that's going to surprise you, because it's really basic stuff. But I'm sure you'd really appreciate today hearing what we need to do to build our own resilience, because our own energy levels are key at the moment before we start looking at people around us. The first thing I want to talk about is sleep. There's a real direct correlation between the quality of your sleep and your mental well-being. We've all been to bed at night, worried about something, had a good night's sleep and woken up the next day and thought, why was I worried about that? It's because you were tired. Now, some of you might be watching me now thinking, David, I'd love a good night's sleep. I just can't get to sleep. And I get that, because I have tough nights too with my sleep. However, at least try and regulate your sleep. Try and go to bed at roughly the same time every night. Try and get up at roughly the same time every morning. And certainly don't stay up too late. I'm sure you'll all relate to this. Those days when you're fairly tired and you think to yourself, do you know what, I'm going to get an early night tonight. And you end up watching a crap film on TV. And you end up going on social media. And before you know it, it's 20 past midnight. And yet again, you're going to have a night where you don't get enough sleep. So sleep's really important. Physical exercise is really important too. It's not surprising that governments around the world have allowed us out for physical exercise, because they recognize the relationship between physical and mental health. All of you should be getting physical exercise, ideally every day. To some of you, that's a 5K run every lunchtime, or an intense workout in a virtual gym at the moment. To me, it's just a walk around the streets where I live, but all of us need physical exercise every day. Another really important thing for everyone listening today is the importance of me time. The most important person in the world to love is not your mother, it's not your children, it's not your partner, it's yourself. The more you love you, the more you can love people around you. We've all been on an airplane, and they say to you, if the oxygen mask come down, you put your mask on first, even if you've got kids with you. Because if you don't do that, you may not be in a position to look after your children. Well, you should all be finding me time at the moment, because you are the most important person. It's actually selfish not to have me time, because if you don't put yourself first and you become ill, how are you going to look after your loved ones? A quick story about someone who underestimated the value of me time. A guy I know, very successful, running a business. Nothing in life fazed him. He never got stressed about anything. But for the first time in his life 3 years ago, he felt he was failing at something. And what he felt he was failing at was being a dad. When he became a dad, he knew he had to create more time for mum and baby because of his busy schedule. So he gave up 3 things. He gave up his Manchester United season ticket. He gave up running, and he gave up car rallying. And we reckon within a few months, he developed postnatal depression because he'd stopped doing things for himself. We got him back to football again. We got him running again. We got him car rallying again. And he's now in a really good place. He will never again underestimate the value of me time. So ask yourselves today, am I doing enough for me? And then I want to talk to you about playtime. Throughout the world, children love playtime at school. Well, this is a true story that came out of the UK last year. A child one day suggested to the school that the teachers should have playtime too. And the head teacher thought, what an amazing idea. So a few weeks later, they had a role reversal. The teachers were told, without exception, you're going into the playground and having playtime. And the kids were told, without exception, you're not getting playtime. The teachers are getting it instead. You know what kids are like? They thought it was amazing. They thought it was a brilliant idea. They look forward more to that playtime than any other playtime they'd had that year. Well, this story has a sad ending because the kids were left really, really disappointed. What they wanted to see when the day arrived was the teachers running around the playground chasing each other, but they all stood there like boring adults, dare I say, some of them on their mobile phones. Now, we give kids playtime for 4 reasons. It's a break between 2 pieces of work to re-energize yourself. It's social interaction. It's fresh air and some sunshine, hopefully, and it's physical exercise. Now, when we grow older, we need playtime as much as when we were children. So I'm going to suggest that some of you are not getting enough playtime in your life at the moment. Playtime to some of you may look very different to others of you, but you all need breaks between 2 pieces of work to re-energize yourself. You all need social interaction. You all need fresh air. My fear around the world at the moment is people aren't leaving their houses. They're getting their heads down and they're working too hard without getting fresh air. And just a few other things to look after your mental health and your energy levels. Give yourself treats. You know, spend time with your friends who make you laugh, who are good fun. Spend less time with people who drain you of energy. Look after your diet. Try and eat and drink healthily. And just be honest with yourself about how you really are. The reason I've started today with my talk and the first half of it talking about your own mental well-being is that it's absolutely critical at times like this that you manage your own energy levels. And too often we are very good at running around looking after everybody else, but not very good at looking after ourselves. So if we're going to maintain energized environments in our workplaces, we have to start with looking at our own energies. There's no doubt this pandemic is a marathon, not a sprint. Any of you know anything about marathons will know that you can hit the wall at 20 miles. Now we're probably only about halfway through this marathon. Some of you at the moment are running a really good race and you think you're doing all the right things about looking after yourself. But if you don't continue to regulate your sleep, if you don't continue to get physical exercise, if you don't continue to create me time and play time for yourself and put yourself first, you could hit the wall later this year. And nobody wants that in your life, not your family, not your friends, and certainly not your colleagues in work as well. So priority number 1 today is to manage your own energy levels during this pandemic. Right, let's move on now to how do we create very energized workplaces during challenging times? How do we keep many of our remote workers very engaged? Now, I've been very privileged in the last few months to work with many leading organizations, and it's given me real insight into what really makes a difference. So I'll just share some of that insight with you now. I think the most important thing that has to happen overall is that employees must feel that we're giving their well-being priority over the needs of the business. Now, I know that for some very task-focused leaders, they will find that quite challenging. Surely thinking, well, at the moment, surely my priority has to be the needs of the business. But trust me, evidence suggests that employers who put the well-being of their employees first in a crisis, firstly, are more likely to survive the crisis. And secondly, they're going to come out the other side of it a lot stronger. I was talking to a CEO about a month ago, and I've known him for a long time. He's very, very commercial. He's very, very sales driven. He runs a very, very successful business. But he put a video out to all of his employees a couple of months ago, which said to them, at the moment, I don't care about sales. What I care about is you, my people. The most important thing to me at the moment is that we get to the other side of this crisis and we still have a great business to work for. And when he said that, he was very authentic. When he said that, he didn't care about sales. He cared about his people because he genuinely cares and he's very authentic. However, at the same time, he's a very smart CEO. And guess what? Sales went up the following day, even though he said he didn't care about sales, because his people were so inspired by him. Completely separate to that, I was talking to one of his employees, somebody I know who traditionally moans about his workplace, who's never totally happy. But this guy said to me that if he was asked to work at the moment for very little pay to help maintain the viability of the business, he would do so. And when I said to him, why would you do that? He said, because at the moment, I am so inspired by my boss. He said, every time he calls me, the first thing he says is, how are you? And he really listens and he really authentically cares about my well-being. And it's as simple as that in some ways. I think it's really critical that all line managers are trained on the value of kindness in a pandemic or outside a pandemic. One of the leading banks in the world gave me some great insight a couple of years ago. They did the biggest ever well-being survey ever undertaken in the UK that involved 76,000 employees. And they asked them lots of questions. And one of those questions was, does this bank care about you, yes or no? Very black and white. And they asked that question because they were confident of getting a really good answer. And guess what? 50% of their workforce, 38,000 employees, said, no, this company doesn't care about me. They were mortified. They drilled into the data. They were determined to find the common denominator, and they found it very, very quickly. It was your line manager. They drilled further into the data to see what is that manager doing or not doing to make you think that this company doesn't care about you. And it was really basic stuff. But number one was that in your one-to-one meetings, those managers were going straight in to talk about sales, KPIs, customers, objectives, as opposed to saying, look, before we talk about work today, how are you? And really listening. Now, that was before this pandemic. Imagine how more important it is now to start conversations before you talk about work with how are you? It's also important at the moment that we increase communication. People don't want less communication, they want more communication. A manager said to me the other day, David, if I contacted my employees every day, they would think I'm checking up on them. And I said, not if you get the tone right, not if you get the messaging right. Employees at the moment want more communication, not less, because they are feeling quite isolated working from home, and they want assurance. I touched on this earlier on. It's really important that senior leaders and senior managers share their own mental health stories, if they've got them, or where it's touched their lives. When senior people talk openly about mental health, it makes it easier for everyone else to also talk about it. And they will inspire people. They will give other people permission in that organization to talk about their mental well-being. I was working with a major law firm last year, and their senior partner stood up and said, the real reason David Beeney's here today is because I'm currently having therapy for depression. It was, people were open-mouthed. He was a very alpha male guy, and no one could imagine that this senior partner, this very powerful lawyer, was going to admit to having challenges with mental health. But guess what? His people were inspired by him. I still know him, and I know that business very well. And a number of other senior people now have also shared their struggles with mental health. It's no longer regarded as a weakness in his business for people to open up and talk about their well-being. So just to summarize some tips for any managers listening today about how to maintain energies during this crisis. Whenever you speak to people, whether it's a team meeting or it's a colleague ringing up, before you get into the work, just check in with people how they are, and make sure that you listen, and perhaps share with them how you're feeling too. That alone can make a huge difference. I know we're really busy at times. There is always time to say, how are you? Ensure that any communication is empathic and displays trust. Someone sent me an email the other day that they'd received from their boss, and the whole email had no empathy in it about what that person may be going through. And it just smacked of distrust. There was even reference to the fact we've got technology to make sure that you're working really hard at the moment. Think about the language that you use. I go on and on about the fact we've got to get better at talking about mental health. The worst thing you can say to anyone is, I'm worried about your mental health, because it's that word mental again. It's too invasive. People go into shutdown mode. Say to someone, how are you out of 10 today? Because globally, we all understand the scale of 1 to 10. We all know that 7 is okay. We know that 8 or 9 is really good. And anything under 7, someone may be troubled. And if someone does say to you, do you know what, I'm only 5 out of 10 today? It makes it a lot easier to say to someone, do you mind me asking what's dragging you down to a 5? Because I know you're normally 7 or 8. And they might just tell you because you're using the language of numbers and not asking them about their mental health. And equally, try and speak to your employees every day. I saw a brilliant Japanese CEO a few years ago, and he was asked to leave us with one golden nugget about how you run an amazingly successful, profitable, highly energized, engaged business. And he simply said, I've got 8 direct reports. I try and speak to them all every other day, but only half of those conversations might be about work. It's about engagement. A lot of people didn't get it that day. And it's never been so important to engage and energize your people. So not even all work conversations need to be about work. If you ring up someone and just check in how they are, and then don't talk about work, they will think, what a great person. What a great business I work for, that people find time to check in with me and not even talk about work. I think a lot of organizations complicate mental health in the workplace. I think they think it's about training up lots of people about mental health. It's not. It took me 5 years to qualify as a mental health counselor. You can't send people on a 2-day workshop or a half-day workshop and expect them to become mini experts in mental health. I think it's all about a little more conversation. It's all about creating kinder cultures in the workplace where we check in with each other that little bit more, but it's authentic. And when we ask people how they are, we actually listen back and we also share how we're feeling too. Try and remember as well what I said earlier, that mental health is going to impact not 1 in 4 of us, not 1 in 2 of us. It's going to impact every single one of us. Mental health isn't when you're necessarily seriously ill. It's if you have a night where you're not sleeping well, or you're struggling to concentrate one day because you've got a lot going on. That's your mental health too. It's simply the health of your mind. And the more we talk about this subject, the more open we are, we make it easier for everyone to talk about this subject. And one myth I must dispel as well. When you create a kinder culture in the workplace and you make it easier for people to open up about their well-being, you will get less people going off sick. You will drive productivity. You will not lose your best people. You will lose less people to sick. Trust me, as a counselor, the last thing you want to be when you're not in a great place is off work. The worst thing is sitting at home staring out the window. You want to work through it. When you create more engaged, kinder cultures in the workplace, you drive energy, and the business wins and the employees win, because it's a greater experience for everybody all round. Thank you very much for listening to this short burst about me, my mental health, and kindness in the workplace. It's been a real privilege to chat to you all this afternoon. Matt Manners, thank you very much. And if you want to take me back to the studio, that will be great. Thank you.
Take me back to the studio. Wow. Thank you so much, David. I knew we couldn't start this week without you, but you've just made that very evident. Thank you so much for sharing both your own story and some really important advice and thought provokers that we should keep in front of mind for ourselves and our people. What we're trying to do, again, is keep bringing back the humanity into the workplace, to create open and inclusive cultures. And one of the biggest ways of doing that, parts of that, is breaking the stigma around mental health and being able to say, I'm struggling today, whatever reason it might be, to your line manager, your boss, your colleague, and then to understand. You've rattled off some checkpoints there. Struggle to concentrate, check. Disturbed sleep, check. Days where energy was low, check. So obviously I've been battling at some stage over the past few months too. And I don't mind people knowing that. Try and break the stigma. I also think a great sentiment coming through there was training your line managers in the importance of kindness. 100%. So from my point of view, thank you so much. If there are any questions, there you go. Thank you for being brave and sharing your personal story and tips, David. It's been an opener. I've known you for years. It's been an eye-opener for me. So, thank you so much. We'll be making this on demand. I think this is a video you're going to want to share with your colleagues and your family during this time, because I think there are some really important life lessons here, actually. So thank you, David. If there are no other questions, we'll probably let him go, and we'll make this on demand on Inspiring Workplaces as of tomorrow morning. So, anything else to say, David?
No, thank you very much again, Matt. Really excited about your brilliant new idea of inspiring workplaces, and thank you for inviting me as your speaker in your summer series. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
It's been outstanding. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow.